Good day and welcome back to another Dbz Dokkan video. In this video we are going to be taking a look at how the AGL LR Super Saiyan Goku and Super Saiyan Vegeta perform in Dbz Dokkan Battle and in the Cell Max event. Now, as I always say, the Cell Max event is not necessarily the greatest event with which to measure just how well a unit does. There's a lot of factors in the Cell Max event that do not suit a lot of units. One, there's not a lot of ramp up time due to the lack of difficulty in the first couple phases and the low amount of health that they have. Secondly, of course, there is also the kind of issue that he is tech based, which gives the AGL units a really difficult time. Thirdly, there is also the factor to consider that essentially, with these guys, they have nice damage reduction, but if they don't get their super attacks off or manage to get into their morale boosted state, they are probably going to struggle quite a bit. And then finally, the big thing is obviously just Evasion has such a high preference in this event just due to how hard Cell Max hits, that it's obviously the preferred method. Now, in terms of them as a unit, they obviously look pretty solid. They do bring a lot of decent stuff. Their leader skill is pretty good. Movie heroes and joint forces with the pure Saiyans, and their passive is also pretty solid. I wouldn't say it's the craziest passive. It's not like they are the most insane unit in the game. I still think Cooler definitely has an edge. I think these guys can definitely be caught in between kind of areas. They are, can suffer a little bit from needing the attacks to be placed correctly. You kind of want all of the attacks to be placed in the second slot. I know that sounds really weird, but you want them to get hit by a whole bunch of normals before they fire their third super attack. That way you can get the morale boost at the perfect time. As the event, or as more difficult events keep going further and further, it becomes more difficult to obviously get those attacks because they're going to be taking more damage. So it's that kind of makes them weird, and that's why having a dupe in them kind of serves them well, because it keeps that defensive level up a little bit higher, which lets them kind of last a little bit longer and a little bit longer into the events that obviously enable them to kind of perform well. Now, in terms of this unit is operating at 55%, so definitely not operating at full capacity or anything like that, but we should still see a pretty good performance overall from them. To recap their passive, for anyone that doesn't know, for the first 3 turns of combat, they will have 40% damage reduction. They'll have one instance of 20% damage reduction, and then they will have another instance of 20% damage reduction for 3 turns, along with a high chance of firing an additional super attack. So that's all perfectly fine. That's all really more than acceptable in terms of their performance. The main issue is obviously you want to try and make sure that they receive their 7 attacks during that period. You don't want them to, not receive those attacks or receive attacks outside of the period, because then it's going to be a little bit of an issue. So that's kind of where they stand. Obviously you want them to morale boost into the tech Cell Max phase, and then you will see how well they do overall. Now, full disclaimer, I think they are far too finicky to use for the Cell Max event. Maybe a rainbow one will be more than fine, but I think, obviously the bonus is that you can place them wherever they need to be in the first 2 phases, but I just think it's still, even then, really quite difficult to get them to kind of perform at their max capabilities. And then even with that, I think they still suffer a lot against Cell Max. Now, a rainbow unit with defensive equips, with full additional, with a whole bunch of things, is going to be fine. A 55% unit, maybe not. and that's kind of where I stand on them, at least for Cell Max. Now, Cell Max is not the best way to measure these guys. These guys are going to be great in a whole bunch of events. Broly events, Omega Shenron, all the Wicked Bloodlines pretty much. It's only really this event, and I think Bojack, where they'll struggle. The reason why they'll struggle with Bojack is if they get kind of connected in the wrong slot, then they're going to be struggling quite a bit. But beyond that, I actually think they're really, really good. They look very, very solid to me. And yeah, they obviously do fine in the first 2 phases. There's no real concerns with them in the first 2 phases at all. So yeah, generally speaking, they seem to do just fine. At least for me, personally speaking. So yeah, obviously there is an added benefit in the Cell Max event that you can kind of line up their attacks as needed. But I would say that obviously there is a little bit, it's still different. They just are getting that morale boost to go into the final phases of super hard content, whether it be Red Zone or Cell Max, is probably the biggest challenge with them. You might find that you run an event and you end up having the absolute perfect run, and boom, they look great. They will have their 30% damage reduction, they'll have their great chance of additional super attack, they will look very, very solid. That is fine. That is great. They will look great, they'll feel great, and I've got no problem with them. It's not to say that they're a bad unit or anything like that. They're definitely not a bad unit, but they do just require a little bit of handling to get to their super powerful stage. First up, Goku, you can just kind of stick there and he'll do his business. These guys you just need to keep an eye on and keep track of what you're doing, keep track of the attacks, and you'll be fine. So here you're going to see them take a super attack, obviously from a Cell Max. Worst case scenario, of course, them taking a super attack, but they will get their super attack off first. This is good. This means that they're going to have a decently high defense. Hopefully they get off a second super attack. That would also really obviously help them out quite a bit. They don't really manage to, and they take obviously a huge amount of damage. It's to be expected. Remember, Cell Max is the best or hardest tech unit in the game. It is almost improbable, considering their kit, even at Rainbow and that, to consider them tanking a super from him. Maybe at Rainbow, after 3 rounds of supers with a defensive equip, maybe with support on rotation, they might survive. I don't think so. I think mathematically it's not even possible. But yeah, you're going to see them take some super attacks now. This is just to showcase that obviously them taking super attacks before and after super really makes no difference. 1.6 million after super, 2 million before they super. It's that worst case scenario, and it's always good to show a unit in their worst case scenario. It's not to downplay the unit. I just like to show really good situations and obviously really bad situations. I just remember these guys are at 55%. Super attacks are not really what we need to measure them with. Like I said, super attacks aren't the only measurement you want to apply to this unit, because they're not really meant, they won't tank his super attack. That's kind of where they're at. So yeah, obviously here we're going to see a little bit better from them. We're going to see how they do in a slightly better scenario. Obviously there's a big difference between getting the super and not getting the super. So here you're going to see them obviously get their super off. It's not going to be their ultra super. They're not going to get the additional, and you're going to see that they are going to take quite a substantial amount of damage, 431k. Now if you were to get them to enter their morale state and you were to get them to fire off their double super, you're going to see obviously a much better performance, and that's what you're going to see here. So in this situation, they have entered their morale state. They are going to now super attack with double supers, so that's going to be something that's useful, and yeah, just overall they are going to do a pretty good job. Obviously you can see Tech Goku there tanking pretty well. That's what he does. That's the highlight of him as a unit. Obviously just that really good kind of ability to tank. Now just remember, they have no ramp up, so beyond getting them to take the attacks to enter their morale state, it's not like they need to stack or do anything else. which I think does play into their favor. They only have one really finicky requirement. But here you'll see double super attacks, second slot, perfect situation, best linking partners. Anything we're lacking is a bit of defense, support on the rotation, and we still take 240k, but you know what? That's not so bad. 240k means that you could run them on some teams and they'll be fine. I think they're more a floater if they're like a last resort for the Cellmax event, but Cellmax is just a fun way to look at how they tank huge tech damage, and I actually think they do really, really well. Considering that's a near 600k tech normal, and they only take 243k, means they're looking pretty good. But that's it from me. Bye.